Hey y'all, Coach in the Fight here, talking about this upcoming war that we read about in the book of Revelation. Now, we understand that there is a lot coming in this tribulation. There is stuff coming from outer space. There is stuff going on with the planet itself, like earthquakes and floods and hurricanes. I can go on and on. Volcanoes going off, and then you have stuff in the air like pestilences and diseases, and all of this stuff is supposed to make up what we call the apocalypse or the tribulation. But one of the things that we don't talk about or don't hear about too much, and that is the war against those that keep the commandments. Now, I'm over here looking in Psalms and chapter 89, a few verses here that's talking about, like 31 is talking about what happens for those who break the statutes and keep not the commandments. The statutes are what you read about over there in Leviticus 23. But this is not where we want to focus this class today. I really want to keep this class here talking about this war in the New Testament of the Bible. One of the weapons, well, let me show you before I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Let me jump over here to Revelations chapter 12 and verse 7. Now, in chapter 12 starts off talking about the Revelation 12 sign in the sky that you saw back there in 2017. You'll see that there's some time stamps given related to that time, particularly the 1,260 days where the woman is led into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of God that they should feed her there. And the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, we don't hear about this verse too much. You know, we don't hear a lot of people talking about this, but this is important. See how the dragon, you know, is this the devil? Is this Satan? Who is this dragon figure? But you see that she's actually wroth with the woman that was led out into the wilderness. But which says right here, and she went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God. So this is a war that's talking about here that we can expect to see in the end times, where those whose names are not written in the book of life will come against those people who are trying to keep the commandments. Now, we already see the early stages of this war. There are people right now, I call them spies, who are watching this video right now as I'm talking about this keeping the commandments. They do it every time. They come over and they see me or hear me talking about keeping the commandments, and then they'll go back to their channel and they'll say the opposite. They'll make a point of saying that we aren't supposed to be keeping the commandments, and that's fine. You know, they have their own channels. They can do what they want to do on their own channels. I don't fault them for doing that at all. That's actually one of the only recourses that people have that want to detract against what we're saying over here at Coaching the Fight, is to, you know, go put it on their own channel, you know, because, you know, we have an obligation to teach the truth. We have an obligation to teach what you read about over there in Matthew in chapter 5. But anyway, I hope you guys feel like soldiers. I hope you feel like warriors, because those of you who keep the commandments, this is what you have coming. Like I said, you're seeing the early stages of it now, but wait until the Antichrist come on the scene. Wait until the Lawless One makes his presence out there. That is one of the main things that he's going to do, is target the people who are keeping the commandments. That's why they call him the Lawless One in the first place. That's why they call him the Antichrist in the first place. You remember that the Christ was the Word made flesh, and knowing that when Christ was born, when Jesus was born here, the only word that existed was the Old Testament. The Mosaic laws was the only word in existence. So if he was the word made flesh, what word was it that was made flesh? Word that hadn't been written yet, or the word that was already in existence? Well, like you read over there in Matthew chapter 5, he said that he came to fulfill the law. He is the Old Testament word made into a fleshly being so that we can see it lived out as a living parable or an example of how it is that we're supposed to be performing what Moses told us to do. You remember, he kept the commandments, he kept the statutes, he kept the feast days and all of that. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I just want you guys to see this part here, because this is primarily the only verse that you see that talks about this war against those that keep the commandments. The people that are actually keeping the commandments. The lawless one, the name lawless comes from the fact that he doesn't want to obey the law. That's why they call him the lawless one. Well, he is actually going to lead his forces, those people who will be an apostate at that time. He will lead them against those members that are keeping the commandments. Now, I don't mean to scare anybody. I know, there's some people watching this that say, well, if he's going to make war against those that's keeping the commandments, maybe I shouldn't keep the commandments. I don't want to be, targeted. I don't want to be on the losing side of this. But actually, when you jump over and you look at Revelation chapter 22, you see that it is those who keep the commandments that actually win. Chapter 22 is the last chapter in the Bible there. Verse 14 says, "Blessed are they that do his commandments." I've got these wildfires popping up over here. It's distracting me, but I meant to, talk about this anyway. These wildfires, guys, we need to start praying for those people over there that's in the way of these wildfires. Remember, that is our responsibility to pray for these individuals. So let's pray for them. Let's send up some prayers every day for those individuals that's fighting these wildfires and in the way of these hurricanes and fighting these pandemics and stuff like that. That's the responsibility. That's our job. That's what we're in the wilderness to do in the first place. But anyway, getting back over here to what we're talking about here, it says, "Blessed are they who do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city." It is those who keep the commandments who have the right to the tree of life. The tree of life means you live forever. This city that he's talking about is New Jerusalem. Those that aren't keeping the commandments have no right to the tree of life, the everlasting life, and they have no right to New Jerusalem, is what it's talking about right there. And then you look down there, verse 15, it's talking about those that don't keep the commandments. It says, "For without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie." These are the people who don't keep the commandments. That is what the commandments teach you, guys. The commandment starts over there in the book of Exodus chapter 20, and it actually goes all the way through to Exodus chapter 24 verse 7 is where it absolutely ends. In 24 verse 7, you hear about the covenant angel in chapter 23. You hear about the judgments or the statutes in 23. You hear about the judgments in chapter 21. You hear about the commandments in chapter 20. But in those 3 or 4 chapters, you hear about how it is that we're supposed to live righteous lives. And those who reject those rules that are talked about over there, they're the ones who end up being what? Dogs, sorcerers, whoremongers, murderers. That's what the law is teaching you not to do. That is the purpose of the commandments, is to teach us how not to be idolaters. That's the second commandment, is don't be an idolater. But they don't keep the commandments, and so it goes on to talk about these guys as well. But let's get back on topic here. We're talking about this war here. Let's look at verse 17 one more time before we go on here. You see right here, it says, the dragon went forth to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments. So we have this war coming up. And like I said, I don't want to scare anybody, so, don't be thinking that you'll jump sides and all of a sudden you don't want to keep the commandments because you don't want to be caught up in this war. Well, it is those that keep the commandments that's going to win in the end. You know, they're the ones that's going to be standing proud in the end. Sure, the other team may seem to be winning now. You know, they got a lot of channels out there. They got a lot of videos out there. That I got a lot of people out there that are talking against keeping the commandments. They even go as far as to say that if you obey the commandments, you are in rejection of the Messiah because he did away with the commandments. Think about that. That's what they teach. You go over there and you listen, and they'll say it plainly. They ain't beating around the bush with it. They'll come flat out and say it. If you obey the commandments, if you do what Moses told you to do, the word given from our father to Moses, if you obey the covenant, then you are rejecting Christ because Christ did away with it. And that's a lie. Christ didn't do away with anything. You know, we saw that over there, and we're gonna get to that in a minute. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I just don't want anybody jumping ship. You know what I'm saying? We need to put our battle dress uniforms on and be ready to fight because we're in this war. You know, we are ready for this war that's pretty much imminent, if not already ongoing. But let me go on. I don't want to talk about that too much. We got a few verses to talk about. One of which is coming out of 1 John chapter 5 and verse 2. It says, "By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments." Look at verse 3. "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous." So, you know, we're being told all throughout the Bible that, you know, we are supposed to keep his commandments. I could have did this out of the Old Testament, but they reject the Old Testament, you know, and we're trying to take some of their ammunition away. So we're going to focus on what they focus on, and that's the New Testament. And I'm going to show you verse after verse here how we are actually supposed to be keeping the commandments. Look at verse 3. It says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous." Look at verse 2. It says, "For this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments." No, and the opposite is true too. Now let's jump back here to 1 John chapter 2. You know, it's kind of odd, you know, that individuals, you know, who don't keep the commandments, but, you know, they are still portraying themselves as Christians. That's what it means to take the Lord's name in vain. When you are calling yourself a Christian, but yet you don't keep the commandments. You know, you're no different than these people are no different than, you know, that rapper that got that Jesus piece on, walking around, you know, acting like, you know, that means something, like that makes him a Christian because he got a Jesus piece on all the time, where he's rapping about misogyny and murder and stuff. You know what I mean? That's taking the Lord's name in vain. You ask him, "Are you a Christian?" He say, "Sure." You know, but his next album that he's going to drop is going to be, you know, on, you know, pimping or whatever. But, you know, anyway, let's look over here at verse 2, chapter 2, verse 3 through 8. It says, "And hereby we do know that we know him, if we keep his commandments." So look at this, guys. You do not know the Father if you don't keep his commandments. I say that slowly because I mean it. If they don't keep the commandments, they don't know who the Father is. This reminds me of a video I was watching not too long ago, where this militia group had went in. They had crossed the country to go over to the west somewhere, where they were going over with the idea that they were going to stand in for the defunding of the police. If they were going to defund the police, you had this militia group that was going to go over there and take care of business. You know, a couple of them actually killed some people. But the video that I'm talking about, you had these individuals who was here receiving a sermon. You had this one guy that was sitting there talking. He was giving a sermon, and he was talking about the Messiah in his sermon. But the people there hearing the sermon, they didn't have Bibles. They had AR-15s. Here these people is claiming to be Christians, on a mission to go kill people. They didn't go over to help people. You know, they didn't show up with food boxes. They didn't show up with their Bible. They didn't show up with tracts to say, you know, love Jesus. These people showed up with AR-15s and thousands of bullets, but yet they're sitting there claiming to be Christian. You know what I mean? That's what this is talking about. They don't keep the commandments. They don't even know who the Father is. Verse 4 says, he that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. So, you know, as you guys jump over to these other websites, like I said, they come over here and they watch these videos, and then they'll go back and they'll put out a video later today or later next week, and they'll be in there refuting everything I'm saying here, talking about how they're not supposed to be keeping the commandments. You know what? They're liars. It says it plainly right here in the New Testament. 1 John chapter 2 says, he that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. Right? That's what it say, right? Like I said, guys, we're at a war here. You know, these people are, you know, claiming to be righteous. They're claiming to be holy. They claiming to be teaching us the, quote, word of God, but they're teaching us against keeping the commandments. You know, we got to recognize who the enemy is, because this war is going to get pretty serious here in a minute. Anyway, let's jump over here and let's look at 22 and verse 36. This is a lawyer here, and he says, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Now, this is one of the main arguments that you're going to hear from those people who say that we aren't supposed to be keeping the commandments. This is the one they love to use. They love to use this. But note here that it's in Matthew chapter 22. This is Matthew chapter 22. That's going to be important here in a second. Jesus said unto him, that thou love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. Okay, now notice here that they didn't say, Jesus, what are the new commandments? Jesus, what are the commandments? That is not the phrase that he said. He says, what is the great commandment? You have 613 different rules in the first 5 books of the Bible alone, but some of them are more important than others. For instance, you look at those rules over there in Leviticus. They have a lot of dietary laws in there. They have a lot of sacrificial laws in there. But when you look at the book of the covenant, when you look at the covenant, that contract that we're under, which is Exodus chapter 20 through chapter 23 or through 24 verse 7, there are no dietary laws in there. There are no sacrificial laws in that covenant, right? We aren't under those rules when it comes to the covenant. Now, sure, we are supposed to be obeying those rules. They are for our benefit. There's a reason why he told us not to eat unclean animals. Eating sharks, eating rats, eating mice is probably bad for you, you know, amongst the other unclean animals, but it's not part of the covenant. You know, so that kind of, to me, you can put in the comment section if you disagree, but that to me adds a certain level of priority to the rule when it's actually included in the covenant. But you see, out of all of the rules that are listed in he's not asking, this lawyer is not asking the Messiah to say, you see right there where 35, it says he was a lawyer, which means that he kept the law. He obeyed the law. He was doing the law. He ain't saying, Jesus, you know, I understand you here now and you didn't get away with the law, so we can forget about all of that stuff that Moses was talking about. What are we supposed to be doing now? That ain't the question. What he's questioning him here, he says, what is the great commandment of the law? And the Messiah goes on to tell him to love God with all your heart and to love your neighbor as yourself, or love your neighbor, am I jumping ahead of myself? Yeah, a little bit. Right there, he says, love God with all of your heart. So now, without jumping over there to Exodus, like I said, I want to stay in the New Testament here. So I'm not going to jump over there and look at the 10 commandments. But the first 4 commandments of the book of Exodus, chapter 20, the first 4 commandments of the 10, all are related to the relationship with the Father. I'm kind of in memory space, so let me try it. The first one says to have no other gods. The second one says to make no graven images, or no images, or no likenesses. The third one says to not take the Lord's name in vain. And the fourth one says to obey the Sabbath day. Now, which one of those can you break and still say that you love God with all your heart? Can you break the Sabbath day and say you love God with all your heart? Nope. You can't. You can't break neither one of those rules and still say that you love the Lord with all your heart. Now, He said, loving the Lord with all your heart is the first commandment. You see right there in verse 38, this is the first of the great commandment. But you have to go back and obey the 10 commandments in order to obey this commandment. He ain't doing away with it. He's just summing it up. Just like the covenant sums up everything else you're reading over there in the first 5 books of the Bible. And just like the 10 commandments in chapter 20 sum up the entire covenant. It ain't taking nothing away. It's just summing everything up. And if you remember, John actually took it a step further and just said love. He ain't say love God or love man. He just said love, period. That summed up everything. But again, how can you love if you're not keeping the commandments? Look at the second commandment. And the second commandment is like unto it, that thou love thy neighbor as thyself. Okay, so you have the first 4 commandments which teach you how to love the Father. The next 6 commandments teach you how to love your brother. So what of those 6 commandments can you break and still claim that you are loving your brother? Can you say that you are loving your brother if you're stealing from him, if you are sleeping with his wife, if you are bearing false witness against him, if you are coveting against his stuff, if you are murdered? None of them. You can't say that you are loving your brother if you are breaking the commandment. And again, that's not what the Messiah was saying here. He's just saying these are the great commandment. Verse 40 says, on these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So that's what he's saying. He's not intentionally trying to take anything away. He's saying this is the summary. This is the summary of what it is that you learned over there. You done went through the law. You done learned the law. Now all you have to do is sum it up in these 2. You know, and you good. But you're not going to be able to break any of them and still say you're keeping this. Okay? But that ain't going to convince everybody. I know there's still some hard-headed people out there watching this video, and this ain't gonna convince them. They like, well, nope, Jesus said it's the 2. Jesus said all we got is the 2. Well, look at right here. These 2 are in chapter 22. These 2 are in chapter 22. We done got through. We're up to, we didn't heard the story. You know, understand it is a story that started over there with John the Baptist, or started over there with the birth of Christ, and it goes all the way in until they put Christ on the cross or whatever. This is a complete story here, and it's in chronological order. It ain't jumping around like Revelations do. This is in chronological order. And so here we are in 22 when he's actually hearing from this lawyer. All right? Watch what happens next. The next chapter we're going to look at, staying in the book of Matthew, we're going back to chapter 19, and then we're going to look at verse 17. There's a reason why I'm doing it like this. You'll see here in a second. And he said unto him, why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is God. But if thou wilt enter into life, keep his commandments. All right. Now, ain't this what Revelation said over there? It is only those who keep the commandments that have a right to the tree of life. That's the purpose of the commandments in the first place, guys. You know, if you haven't heard, let me be the first one to tell you. The reason for the commandments are to help you survive the tribulation. You know, that's the purpose why we're here. That's why nobody gets in trouble for breaking the commandments now. You could go out here and break all the dietary laws you want. I bet you there are somebody in this country right now that's eating a rat. Are they going to die because they're eating that rat? Nope. They are not. They're going to eat it, and they're going to be eating something else strange and weird tomorrow. But there's coming a time during the tribulation where if you eat that rat, it's going to kill you. You know, that's the purpose of it. It's because there's something coming in the tribulation. We could already see certain aspects of it now, talking about this pandemic and how they're saying that it was, you know, started in that wet market over there in, you know, I'm not going to name the country and anywhere, but they was pointing out these weird animals that these people were eating or whatever, and saying that, you know, this was why we got this pandemic. You know, I ain't going to say that that's true or not, but from what I understand in the Bible, that kind of thing is coming one day. If it ain't true then, it's going to be true in the future. Eating these unclean animals are going to make you sick. That's why you want to keep the commandments now. So when the day comes and you're faced with, you know, should I eat this? Let me see if I can name 2 animals off the top of my head. Should I eat this? I'm going to see if I can name some weird stuff. Should I eat this roach or should I eat this cricket? Which one? Which one is good for you and which one ain't? I'm gonna tell you, one of them's good for you and one of them ain't. Should I eat a grasshopper or should you eat a spider? Which one is edible? Okay? A camel or a horse? You need to know those, right? You might be faced with that one day. Which one would you eat? Are you going to starve and say, I'm not eating either one of them? No, you need to know your dietary laws so you know which one is actually a clean animal and is not going to make you sick when it comes down to it. One of them is a clean animal, a horse or a camel. Which one is it? You know, that's the purpose of the law. That's why you need to know what the law is, because you never know what's going to happen in this tribulation, and that may be the only food. You know, are we going to eat our horse or are we going to eat our camel? You know. Anyway, I'll let you jump over there, understand your dietary laws. I'm gonna go ahead, and where we going next? The same thing is true with the feast days. You know that it's on Atonement Day. It says that if you work on Atonement Day, then you will be destroyed from among your people. Well, people was working on the Atonement Day last year. Did they get killed? They was working on Atonement Day the year before that, and all their lives. Have anybody died for working on Atonement Day? No, the laws are for the survival of the tribulation, and there's coming a time during Atonement Day when you're going to find yourself working down there just like you always have been, and it's going to be a life or death situation. You know, that's the same way with the Sabbath day. It's going to be a life or death situation. It's just not here yet. You know, this is foreshadows of things to come. It's kind of there to help us. All right, now let's go back to chapter 5 of the book of Matthew. Now remember, it was all the way up there in 22 where the Father summarized the 2 commandments: love the brother and love thyself. Like I said, a lot of people try to use that and say that, you know, that's what they use to say that Jesus did away with the commandments and that we only have 2 commandments, right? But that was in chapter 22, right? Come all the way back here to chapter 5 and verse 17. And you see what the Messiah taught about the law. He says right there in 17, he says, think not that I've come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am come not to destroy, but to fulfill. So here it is. He's telling us that he didn't come to destroy the law. He came to fulfill the law. He came to give us an example of what it means to walk around in the law. He came to be the blood that covered our sins right now. That's what it means to fulfill the law. He didn't take nothing away. He added to it. He added his blood. Whereas before we had the blood of lambs and the blood of sheep, he added his own personal blood to it. And he added wine to the mix too. So now, you know, instead of us having to sprinkle blood on ourselves for the remission of our sins, we actually get baptized once. We can do it more than once. I would suggest you get baptized, you know, as an aside note, as a tangent. If you ain't never been baptized, it is absolutely necessary that you get baptized. Those same people that try to tell you that you ain't supposed to keep the commandments, they tell you you ain't supposed to get baptized too. They're trying to trick you guys. You got to get baptized unless you better than Jesus, who had to get baptized. Unless you like John the Baptist, who was born with the Spirit from birth, you got to get baptized. You know, so let's get back on target here. You see right here in verse 18, it says, for verily I say to you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Not one jot or one tittle. I looked that up one time. What is a jot and what is a tittle? A jot is one of them is that period looking thing above the eye. That thing you put above the eye. Not one of them is going away. Not one little spot, one little mark, to one little tittle out of the whole entire law will ever go away until when? Until all be fulfilled. Right? He said even the earth will go away first. Now, if you know your eschatology, you know that in about 1,000 years from now, the whole planet is going to go up in flames. It's going to burn up. You know, about 1,000 years from now, this planet is going away. And that's what it's talking about. Till heaven and the earth pass, until the earth is gone. Those laws are still going to be in effect. They're never going away. The only difference, the only change will be is that instead of them being written on stone tablets like they were back there with Moses, they're actually going to be written on our heart. But it's still going to be the same rules. It's still going to be the same laws. And that's what it's telling you here, that none of it is going away until all of it be fulfilled. And then you see right there in verse 19, it says, whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. For whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. See, that's what I'm doing here. That's why I stress teaching the commandments, because I want to be called great in the kingdom of heaven. I don't want to be like those guys who are called great now in the kingdom of earth. You know, the Reverend Pastor Deacon Dr. Doug with his big fancy purple robe on, his thousands of people in his congregation, his multi-million-dollar jet, you know what I'm saying, his $300,000 car he ride around in. He's great now. He's exalted now. But this is still a little bit too early now. When it comes time to the kingdom of heaven, he's going to be looking really humbled. Because why? Because he's been teaching against the law. He's been teaching people that they shouldn't keep the commandments. And so when we get into the heat of the tribulation, are those commandments going to serve him and help him? Are the angels going to come to try to help him when he's led so many people astray? No, that's not what the Bible teaches. It teaches that, he's actually going to, be one of the first people to suffer. But the reason, I'm trying to bring this out here in verse 5 is because this is what the Messiah was teaching about the law. It was how many 17 chapters later that he's going to sum this up into 2. He didn't take anything away. Is he undecisive? Does he not know what he really thinks? Was he all of a sudden convinced by the haters that jumped on his YouTube channel and told him he didn't know what he was talking about, and he finally changed his mind and started saying something different? No, he didn't do that. I promise you he didn't do that. If anything, those haters made him stronger and made him hammer in even more on the message, just like I'm doing now. That's the reason why I'm doing this. People are come on my channel, going to get it down there in the comment section and keep trying to hammer at me and say that we ain't supposed to be keeping the laws. And you know what? It ain't going to work. If anything, it's going to make me put out more and more videos like they need more convincing, Lord. They need me to tell them again. And I'm going to put out another video telling them again that we are supposed to be keeping these commandments. And I'm showing you proof. I'm showing you proof after proof that the Messiah said so too. Right? He's saying right here in verse 5 that we are supposed to be keeping the commandments, and anybody who says different is going to look stupid in the kingdom of heaven. They exalted now. They look great now, but they're going to look real foolish come the kingdom of heaven. You know what I mean? And then it's after 5 that he sums it up over there in 22 when he sums it up and says that the 2 great commandments are to love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I hope you guys are ready for this war. Like I said, you can see the early stages of this battle that's starting to ensue, and it's going to get worse, guys. When this Antichrist comes on the scene, it's going to be much, much worse. It's going to be a unified effort on their part to come against us. Right now, they're just running their mouth. But it's coming a day when this is going to be an all-out war. So you need to understand your weapons. Keeping the law, keeping the commandments is what's going to be our protection when it comes to this thing. So we need to understand this now, and that's the reason why I'm putting this out. And it's not only the commandments that you read about in Exodus chapter 20, but it's also the judgments you read in Exodus chapter 21, and it is the statutes that you read about over there in Exodus chapter 23. That's also the chapter where you hear about the covenant angel that's going to help us through this tribulation. That's what Revelation chapter 12 is talking about when it says it's leading us into the wilderness. We have angelic protection. You don't have to really be in the country. You can be in a wilderness type state, even in the city, as long as you have those angels that's actually going to be help steering you out of harm's way. That's the only way you're gonna know how to get out of the way. You can't dodge a hurricane or a nuclear bomb or an earthquake. You don't know which direction to run in. But when you have those angels protecting you that you get by keeping the covenant, then you can expect to be able to survive to the end of this tribulation. All right. So The reason why I bring that up, those statutes, is because we have the fall feast days coming up. We got the memorial blowing of trumpets. We got Atonement Day, and we got Tabernacles coming up. Those are extremely important days. The Day of Atonement, we are expecting to fast according to Isaiah chapter 58. Go ahead and read that so you can understand what it means to fast. That falls under the loving your brother as yourself and loving the Father, with all your heart kind of deal. That it's mandatory that we do that, guys. And then the Feast of Tabernacles is also a mandatory feast. It's a week-long feast. We'll be putting out classes on that. You can read about it over there in Leviticus chapter 23 to get a heads up on it already. But I bring that up because the season that we're in is necessary that we perform those feasts. We understand that that's how we get our seal, through the keeping of those feast days. The feast days are the mark of our Father, and not keeping the feast days is the mark of the beast by simple mathematics. So let's get ready to keep those correctly. All right, if you got something out of this video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button. Go ahead and leave us a comment either way. And shalom.